What made a caring family man do something terrible? And how can you spot someone who might be a psychopath? Let's explore what psychopathy means. It's a type of mental disorder where a person lacks feelings like empathy and compassion, and they might seem shallow or self-centered. They can be really good at tricking people and hiding who they truly are, even fooling their own family. The Lissi family story is a scary example of this. Someone who seemed loving and close suddenly turned into someone who did something awful, even to their own kids. The man's actions and reasons for doing such a bad thing were shocking. People wondered if he was crazy, but tests showed he knew exactly what he was doing. This case shook Italy, especially the small town of Betti, where it happened. Now, let's try to understand what happened leading up to this sad event. It all started early on, Saturday, June 14th, 2014, in the quiet town of Betti. The day started like any other in Betti, with people going about their usual routines. But as the sun rose, the tranquility of the town was shattered by a series of events that would leave the community reeling for years to come. Neighbors woke up to the sound of sirens and commotion, unsure of what was happening. As details began to emerge, the horror of the situation became clear. A family known and respected in the tight-knit community had been torn apart by an unimaginable act of violence. The Lissi family, once the epitome of happiness and stability, now lay at the center of a tragedy that sent shockwaves through the entire country. What could drive a seemingly devoted husband and father to commit such a heinous crime? As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful day, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Behind the facade of a loving family man lurked a darker, more sinister side, one that few had ever suspected existed. But amidst the chaos and confusion, one question remained unanswered. Why? What could possibly motivate someone to betray everything they once held dear and commit such an unspeakable act? As the community struggled to come to terms with the enormity of what had transpired, one thing became abundantly clear. The Lissi family tragedy was not just a crime, but a wake-up call, a sobering reminder of the dangers that could lie hidden behind even the most idyllic facades. A man named Alex, who is 31 years old, was seen by his neighbors looking out of his windows, calling for help. He seemed scared and confused, talking unclearly and asking for someone to call the police. When people came to see what was happening, Alex told them that bad people had come into his house and hurt his family. He was not there because he was watching a soccer game with his friends. When he came back, he found his house a mess and his family not moving. His wife Basha was 38 years old, and they had a 5-year-old daughter and a son who was 1.5 years old. The neighbors called the police and the ambulance. While waiting, the person on the phone asked Alex to see if his family was still alive and to try to help them if they were. But Alex yelled that he would not go back inside or touch them. It was strange that he called his family bodies, even before he knew if they were really gone. When the police and doctors came and said his family had passed away, Alex did not show much feeling. He tried to cry but could not, and he seemed almost not to care. He had trouble remembering what happened and said different things, but he said he had a video on his phone that would show he did not do anything wrong. However, this video became important evidence against him. This was the start of a big court case that was solved quickly. The story that Alex said about robbers was not believed, and he became the main person the police thought did it. They found more proof at his house and started to think that maybe Alex had problems with his mind. Now, let's talk about Basha Ley, who was born as Basha Omas. She was born on September 17, 1975, in a small town in northern Italy called Pavia. She was the oldest child in her family and was always very strong, independent, and wanted to do well in Massachusetts. She was lean and had many friends because she was flirted and zipney. She was highly good at her job, went to a famous university, resigned of Evan moved out of her moved to a big city of in her family a lot, and they not really show gambling in her countryside. When she got up in the routine and still became a manager in civilly children working at a big battle, also loved theater and spent her free time acting in plays and musicals. She had a strong singing voice and was quite talented. People in Massachusetts liked her, and she was even recognized on the streets sometimes. However, she didn't have much luck in her personal life. She met many men, but none seemed right for a serious relationship. Then there's Alex Lissi, who was born in 1982 in Caserano, Italy. He was the oldest son in his family. His dad was very strict and favored Carlo's younger brother. Alex worked hard to please his parents. He did well in school and played volleyball, even though he preferred soccer. He never argued with his dad, who had strict rules for the house. Alex was nervous and shy as a teenager. He didn't have many friends and was bullied at school. Over time, he learned to blend in and be polite, even though he didn't feel close to anyone. Alex was good at avoiding tough questions and seemed to lack deep emotions. People who knew him said he didn't seem to care much about others' feelings. Carlo's life at home was tough. His dad was very strict and always favored his younger brother. Alex tried his best to do everything his parents wanted. He was great at school and played volleyball, but he really loved soccer. He never talked back to his dad, who had very strict rules at home. Alex was a quiet and shy teenager. He didn't have many friends and was often bullied at school. As he grew up, he learned to just go along with things and be nice to everyone, even though he didn't feel close to anyone. Alex was good at avoiding difficult questions and didn't show his feelings much. People who knew him said he didn't seem to care much about other people's feelings. Betty, on the other hand, was successful and loved by many. She was talented in her job and in the arts, but finding true love was a challenge. She met many men, but none were right for a long-term commitment. Despite this, she kept hoping to find someone special. Both Betty and Alex had their own struggles and dreams. They were different in many ways, but both were looking for something more in life. Betty searched for love, while Alex sought acceptance and a sense of belonging. Their journeys were not easy, but they continued to hope for a brighter future. After finishing school, Alex went to a well-known university to study economics, which his dad chose for him. Even though Alex didn't like economics or numbers, he didn't say anything and couldn't go against his dad's choice. So, Alex got used to doing things he didn't like just to make others happy. Alex was good-looking and used his looks to his advantage. He stayed fit with sports and going to the gym, which made him even more attractive. This made him very confident, maybe too much, and he started to love himself a lot. Alex liked to date a lot, but he didn't want anything serious. He didn't want to be responsible, make long-term plans, or get too attached, which often led to breakups. Even after college, Alex lived with his parents and didn't want to live on his own or start a family. He got a job at a big IT company in Milan, earned well, and had good chances to grow, but he wasn't happy with his work. His parents, though, were very proud, especially his dad. Alex didn't want to let them down, so he stayed away from any fights or criticism, but then his parents wanted him to get married and have kids. They knew about his short relationships and that he wasn't good at keeping them. This caused a lot of arguments at home. Alex would say he'd find a wife and have a family soon to avoid fights. Alex met Basha at a musical where she was singing. He was really impressed by her talent and charm. He was too shy to talk to her then, but later they met through friends. Alex was 23 and Basha was 30. They started dating even though there was an age gap. Basha, who was focused on her career, now wanted a family with Carlo. She saw some things in Carlo, like his hesitation and coldness, that she thought she could change. She took charge in their relationship and Alex went along with it. A few months later, Basha introduced Alex to her family, but her parents didn't think Alex was right for her. They thought he was not serious enough and too immature for a real relationship. Basha's parents' concerns grew as they watched Carlo's behavior. They saw him as someone who lived for the moment without any real plans for the future. Basha, on the other hand, was ready to settle down and wanted a partner who shared her vision. Despite their differences, Alex and Basha's connection seemed to deepen. Alex appreciated Basha's independence and strength, while Basha admired Carlo's free spirit. They complemented each other, with Basha bringing stability to Carlo's life and Alex adding a touch of adventure to Basha's. As time went on, Alex started to feel the pressure of Basha's expectations. She wanted a commitment, a sign that Alex was ready to be a part of something bigger than himself. But Alex was torn between his desire for freedom and his growing affection for Basha. One day, Basha sat Alex down for a serious talk. She expressed her love for him, but also her need for a real commitment. She asked Alex if he could see a future with her, one that included marriage and children. Alex realized that he had to make a choice. He could either embrace the life that Basha offered, a life full of love and family, or he could continue to live without strings, but also without Basha. After a long night of thinking, Alex made his decision. He chose to take the leap with Basha, to build a life together. They got engaged, and soon after, they were married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Carlo's parents were thrilled, and even Basha's parents came around when they saw how happy their daughter was. Alex had finally found a balance between his own desires and the expectations of those he loved. He and Basha started their new life together, full of hope for the future. Basha chose to listen to her heart despite Carlo's actions. Meanwhile, Carlo's parents were happy with Basha because they saw her as a mature and capable woman who could handle their son, who was often unsure and irresponsible. The family leader was especially pleased, making Alex feel he had chosen well. About a year after they met, Alex and Basha moved in together and began planning their wedding. Alex was quiet and agreeable, always going along with Basha and avoiding any arguments. Basha was the decision-maker, and Alex supported her choices. This worked well for Basha, and she believed they would have a long, happy life together. However, just before their wedding, Alex showed a different side of himself, almost leading to their breakup. At his bachelor party, Carlo's friends encouraged him to have a last fling, and he ended up spending the night with another woman. The next morning, Alex told the woman he loved her and wanted to leave Basha for her. Later that day, he told Basha everything and said he didn't want to get married. Basha took the news well, packed up, and planned to move back with her parents while looking for her own place. When Carlo's father found out what had happened and that Alex had ended the engagement, he was angry. He told Alex he wouldn't see him until he apologized to Basha and convinced her to marry him. Alex did as his father said, bought flowers and went to Basha's house. Her parents didn't like Carlo, especially after his infidelity, and didn't want to see him. But Basha decided to forgive Alex and give him another chance. The wedding happened as planned, and they used the money from relatives to buy a house. Their life seemed perfect, with good jobs and enough money for luxuries. They had 2 children, Bea and Bradley, and to everyone else, they seemed like a happy family. Alex tried to keep his wife happy, not so much out of love, but to avoid conflict. Basha was satisfied with their life. As the years passed, Alex and Basha's marriage faced the usual ups and downs. They were both successful in their careers, which brought financial stability and allowed them to provide a comfortable life for their children. However, beneath the surface, there were issues that they had never fully addressed. Carlo's tendency to avoid conflict led to a lack of open communication between him and Basha. He would often agree to things without truly committing to them, which left Basha feeling uncertain about his true feelings. Despite this, she continued to hope that their love and family would bring them closer together. Basha, on her part, had always been the more dominant personality in the relationship. She made most of the decisions regarding their home and children, often without much input from Carlo. While this arrangement had worked for them initially, over time, it began to create a distance between them. Their children, Bea and Bradley, grew up in a loving home, but they could sense the tension between their parents. Bea, being the oldest sibling, often found herself mediating small disagreements and trying to keep the peace. One summer, the family went on a vacation to the Italian countryside, hoping to reconnect and strengthen their bond. It was during this trip that Alex and Basha finally had the heart-to-heart conversation they had been avoiding for years. They talked about their dreams, fears, and the future they wanted for themselves and their children. Alex admitted that he had been afraid to express his opinions and desires, worried about disappointing Basha and the children. Basha confessed that she had been feeling lonely in the marriage, missing the emotional connection they once had. This honest exchange was a turning point for them. They agreed to work on their communication and to make decisions together. They also decided to spend more quality time as a family and as a couple, to rediscover the love that had brought them together in the first place. Over the next few months, Alex and Basha made a conscious effort to change the dynamics of their relationship. They started having regular date nights, attended couples therapy, and made sure to involve each other in parenting decisions. Their efforts paid off, And slowly, the warmth and affection that had been missing started to return. They learned to appreciate each other's strengths and to support each other's weaknesses. Their children noticed the change too, and the family became closer than ever. Alex and Basha, this story is a reminder that even when love is challenged by time and circumstances, with effort and communication, it can be rekindled and grow stronger. They showed that it's never too late to change, and that a happy family life is built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. Alex lived 2 lives. At home, he was a perfect family man, spending time with his wife and kids. But in Milan, where he worked, he changed completely. He often met different women and went on dates. He liked being in charge of these short relationships, deciding when they would start and end. At home, his wife Basha was in charge, and Alex followed her rules. Rumors of Carlo's secret life reached Basha. Whenever she asked that, Alex said they were lies. In 2013, after their second child was born, Alex thought about leaving his family for another woman. He even told Basha, but she convinced him not to, saying it would upset his parents. Alex agreed. In 2014, a new woman named Maria started working with Carlo. He liked her a lot and tried to get her attention with gifts and compliments, but Maria didn't want to date a married man with kids. Alex didn't give up, even though she said no. Alex started to feel unhappy with his family. He thought they were stopping him from being happy. He imagined a perfect life with Maria if he wasn't married. He thought about this a lot and got very upset. He talked to Basha about divorce again, but she convinced him it was a bad idea. Alex looked for divorce lawyers online, but didn't like that he'd have to give half his money to Basha and pay for his kids. So, he started looking up how to end someone's life without getting caught. He read about a robbery where the robbers got away with it. Alex thought of a terrible plan to make it look like a robbery at his home. On June 13, 2014, Alex spent the day with his family. They went to an amusement park, shopping, and a cafe. Alex made sure they were seen by many people. That day, some people saw him and his family. Everyone noticed they were very happy when they got back home. The couple put their kids to bed upstairs and then went downstairs to the living room. They made love, which was part of Carlo's plan to avoid suspicion. He thought if people knew they were intimate, they wouldn't suspect him of harming his family later. Basha, Carlo's wife, thought he was getting ready to watch soccer with friends. She stayed in the living room watching TV. But Alex went to the kitchen, grabbed a big knife, and quietly approached Basha from behind. He stabbed her in the neck. Basha tried to escape, not realizing it was her husband at first. When she saw him with the knife, she was shocked. She tried to defend herself, but Alex was stronger. He kept attacking until she stopped moving. After killing Basha, Alex went upstairs and killed their 5-year-old daughter and 18-month-old son. Experts believe the kids probably didn't suffer and likely didn't wake up. Neighbors heard screams but didn't call the police because they thought the noise stopped quickly. If they had been more careful, maybe the children could have been saved. Afterward, Alex tried to make it look like a robbery. He cleaned up and washed off the blood. But he made mistakes, like putting back on underwear with blood on it. Then he went to a bar with friends like nothing happened. Later, he sent messages to Basha's phone as if everything was normal. He came back home around 3 a.m. and acted shocked, pretending to discover the crime scene, but he accidentally recorded it on his phone, which ruined his plan. The police quickly realized it wasn't a robbery. The doors and windows were intact, showing the killer had access to the house without breaking in. After realizing Carlo's initial claim of a robbery didn't add up, investigators dug deeper. They found evidence that pointed directly at Carlo. His story fell apart under scrutiny. The footage from his own phone showed him staging the scene, contradicting his alibi. The investigation revealed the chilling truth. Alex had planned the murders meticulously. He had calculated every move, from the initial attack to the staged robbery. But his mistakes, like leaving behind blood-stained underwear and forgetting to turn off his phone's camera, sealed his fate. In court, Carlo's friends were baffled by the man they thought they knew. How could someone they considered a friend commit such a heinous crime? But the evidence spoke for itself, and Alex was convicted of triple homicide. The tragedy left the community reeling. How could a seemingly happy family be torn apart by such violence? It was a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. As for Carlo, he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars, haunted by the memories of the family he destroyed and the lies he told to cover his tracks. Some things didn't add up after the murders. Even though money and Basha's jewelry were in plain sight, it seemed like the mess was staged. Items were just knocked over, not searched through, and there was no reason for robbers to harm the sleeping children upstairs. The case quickly changed from a robbery to deliberate murder. Carlo, Basha's husband, became the prime suspect. His statements didn't match up, and he couldn't explain the fresh cut on his hand. Experts found tiny blood splatters on his clothes, not consistent with his story of trying to revive his family. The video Alex provided showed he didn't check on his wife or the children. Instead, he ran outside immediately, but he claimed he knew they were all dead and how they were killed. The discovery of a bloodied cloth in the trash was crucial evidence. It showed Alex tried to clean up after the murders. After his arrest, Alex stopped pretending to be upset. He showed no guilt or remorse, even for his own family. Evidence from Carlo's laptop revealed he planned the murders. He confessed when he realized denying it was pointless. Shockingly, his motive was to avoid sharing assets with Basha in a divorce and to start a new life with someone else. Alex was sentenced to life in prison. He showed no emotion during the trial, only remarking that he thought so. His father couldn't accept his son's actions and died of a heart attack shortly after Carlo's conviction. He couldn't believe he raised such a remorseless monster. After Carlo's sentencing, the community was left grappling with the horror of the crime. Many wondered how someone could be capable of such cold-blooded actions, especially towards their own family. Carlo's lack of remorse and his calculated planning left a chilling impression on those who followed the case. In the aftermath of the trial, questions lingered about Carlo's mental state. Was he truly aware of his actions, as the psychiatric examination suggested? Or was there something deeper at play? Some argued that his actions were indicative of a psychopathic nature, while others questioned whether he was truly sane. The tragic impact of Carlo's actions extended beyond his immediate family. The loss reverberated through the community, leaving neighbors, friends, and even strangers shaken. People struggled to comprehend how someone could prioritize their own desires over the lives of innocent children and a devoted spouse. Despite Carlo's attempts to move on with his life, the scars of his crimes remained. His name became synonymous with evil and betrayal, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals. As time passed, the wounds caused by Carlo's actions began to heal, but the memory of the tragedy endured. It served as a cautionary tale, reminding others to remain vigilant and to cherish the bonds of family and love. Meanwhile, Alex remained behind bars, serving out his sentence in a prison cell. His life, once filled with deceit and violence, had been reduced to a stark existence devoid of freedom or redemption. And as the years passed, he would be forced to confront the consequences of his actions and the lives he had destroyed. In the quiet suburb of Millbrook, nestled just outside the bustling city of Hartford, Connecticut, a heinous crime shattered the illusion of peaceful suburban life. On a crisp autumn morning in September 2018, the body of 17-year-old Sarah Thompson was discovered in the woods behind her family's home. The gruesome scene sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents locked behind their doors and whispering about the killer who walked among them. Detective Michael Carter, a seasoned investigator with the Hartford Police Department, was called to lead the case. With his sharp intuition and unwavering dedication, Carter delved into the intricate web of lies and deceit surrounding Sarah's murder. Little did he know that this case would challenge his perceptions and force him to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. As the investigation unfolded, suspicion initially fell on Sarah's stepmother, Amanda Wilson. The troubled relationship between the two had been no secret to their neighbors, and Amanda's apparent jealousy of her stepdaughter seemed to provide a motive. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case lay a twisted tale of betrayal, secrets, and fatal consequences. At the center of this tragedy stood Robert Wilson, Sarah's stepfather, a respected businessman and pillar of the community. Robert appeared to be the grieving father figure, supporting his wife through their shared loss. But as Detective Carter would soon discover, Robert's carefully constructed facade concealed a web of lies that would ultimately lead to his downfall. This is the story of a murder that tore apart a family, challenged a detective's instincts, and revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked desire and betrayal. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators are hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy in our very own neighborhoods. Sarah Thompson was a vibrant and promising young woman whose life was tragically cut short just weeks before her 18th birthday. Born to single mother Amanda Thompson in 2001, Sarah grew up as a bright and curious child, always eager to learn and explore the world around her. From an early age, Sarah showed a passion for art and literature. Her teachers often praised her creativity and insightful essays, marking her as a student with great potential. Sarah's artwork adorned the walls of her high school, and she had recently begun to explore photography, capturing the beauty of nature in the woods behind her home, the same woods that would ultimately become the site of her untimely death. Despite her academic and artistic achievements, Sarah's home life was far from perfect. When she was 12, her mother married Robert Wilson, a successful local businessman. While Sarah initially welcomed the stability Robert brought to their lives, the relationship between stepdaughter and stepfather grew increasingly strained as Sarah entered her teenage years. Friends and classmates described Sarah as kind-hearted but fiercely independent. She had a small, tight-knit group of friends and was known for standing up against bullying in school. Her best friend Emily Chun recalled Sarah's dream of studying journalism at NYU, aspiring to become an investigative reporter and uncover truths hidden beneath the surface. Sarah's relationship with her mother, Amanda, had always been complex. As an only child, Sarah had been the center of Amanda's world for years. However, the arrival of Robert in their lives created a shift in dynamics. Sarah often felt that her mother prioritized her new marriage over their mother-daughter bond, leading to frequent arguments and emotional distance. In the months leading up to her death, those close to Sarah noticed a change in her demeanor. She became more withdrawn, spending increased time alone in her room or wandering in the woods with her camera. Her art took on darker themes, and her usually meticulous schoolwork began to slip. Emily remembered Sarah seeming distracted and worried, but when pressed, Sarah would brush off concerns with a forced smile and a change of subject. What no one knew at the time was that Sarah had stumbled upon a secret that would prove fatal. In her quest for truth and her natural curiosity, she had uncovered something that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. Sarah Thompson's young life, full of promise and potential, was snuffed out just as she stood on the threshold of adulthood, leaving behind a community in mourning and a mystery that would shake Millbrook to its core. Robert Wilson, aged 45 at the time of Sarah's murder, presented himself as the epitome of suburban success. A charismatic and well-respected financial advisor, Robert had built a thriving practice in Hartford, managing the wealth of some of the city's most affluent residents. His polished appearance and confident demeanor made him a natural leader in the community, serving on the local chamber of commerce and coaching youth soccer. Born and raised in a working-class family in Boston, Robert had clawed his way up the social ladder through a combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthless ambition. He met Amanda Thompson at a charity gala in 2012, and their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage just 8 months later. To the outside world, Robert appeared to be the perfect husband and stepfather, providing stability and financial security to Amanda and Sarah. However, beneath the veneer of success and respectability, Robert harbored dark secrets and unfulfilled desires. His marriage to Amanda had quickly lost its luster, and he found himself drawn to the excitement of an illicit affair. For the past year, Robert had been involved in a passionate relationship with Elena Gonzalez, the wife of his next-door neighbor and close friend, David. Robert's affair with Elena was more than just a physical attraction. He felt truly alive in her presence, experiencing a connection he believed he had never shared with Amanda. The two lovers would meet in secret, stealing moments of passion while their spouses were at work or running errands. Robert became expert at lying and manipulating those around him to maintain his double life. As Sarah entered her late teens, Robert found himself increasingly uncomfortable in her presence. Her perceptive nature and keen eye for detail made him paranoid that she might uncover his infidelity. He began to avoid spending time alone with his stepdaughter, making excuses to miss family dinners and events. Friends and colleagues described Robert as charming and generous, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. David Gonzalez, unaware of Robert's betrayal, often praised him as the best neighbor and friend a man could ask for. Robert's clients trusted him implicitly, drawn in by his confident assurances and impressive track record. Yet, those who knew Robert best sensed an underlying current of discontent. His assistant at the financial firm noted his increased irritability and distraction in the months leading up to Sarah's death. Robert's longtime friend from college, Mark Stevens, observed that Robert seemed to be living on edge, as if constantly looking over his shoulder. Little did anyone suspect that behind Robert Wilson's carefully crafted image lay a man capable of unspeakable acts, driven by desperation to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life at any cost. The grisly discovery was made on the morning of September 15, 2018, by a jogger on his usual trail through the woods behind the Wilson residence. The body of Sarah Thompson lay partially concealed beneath a pile of leaves and branches, a crude attempt at concealment that did little to hide the horrific nature of the crime. Detective Michael Carter arrived on the scene within the hour, his experience taking in every detail. Sarah's body showed signs of a violent struggle. Bruises marred her arms and face, and defensive wounds on her hands indicated she had fought desperately for her life. The cause of death was immediately apparent: a jagged wound across her throat, likely inflicted with a serrated blade. As the forensics team combed the area for evidence, Carter noted several key details. Sarah's camera, which friends claimed she always carried on her woodland excursions, was missing. Drag marks and disturbed vegetation suggested the body had been moved from the initial site of the attack, possibly in an attempt to hide it from immediate discovery. Perhaps most tellingly, there were no signs of sexual assault, leading Carter to suspect that the motive for the murder was personal rather than opportunistic. The brutality of the attack pointed to a crime of passion, someone who knew Sarah and had been driven to a moment of uncontrollable rage. As news of the murder spread, the once peaceful community of Millbrook descended into a state of fear and suspicion. Neighbors who had previously left their doors unlocked now double-checked their security systems. Parents kept their children indoors, and the woods that had once been a place of recreation became a no-go zone, cordoned off with yellow police tape. Detective Michael Carter, a 20-year veteran of the Hartford Police Department, took charge of the investigation with grim determination. Known for his meticulous approach and uncanny ability to see connections others missed, Carter had solved some of the department's most challenging cases. As he stood in the Wilsons' living room, surveying the family photos on the mantel, he knew this case would test him like never before. The first 48 hours of the investigation were a whirlwind of activity. Carter and his team conducted initial interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors. Sarah's school records were examined, her social media accounts scrutinized, and her movements in the days leading up to her death were painstakingly reconstructed. Robert Wilson, appearing shell-shocked, provided a detailed account of his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He claimed to have been working late at his office, a fact corroborated by security footage and his assistant's testimony. Amanda Wilson, still visibly distraught, struggled to maintain composure during her interview. She admitted to having argued with Sarah the afternoon before her disappearance, but insisted it was just typical mother-daughter friction. As Carter delved deeper, a picture began to emerge of a household fraught with tension. Neighbors spoke of frequent arguments between Sarah and her mother, their raised voices often carrying across manicured lawns. Sarah's best friend, Emily Chun, revealed that Sarah had been increasingly unhappy at home, feeling trapped and misunderstood. The forensics team's initial findings provided more questions than answers. Trace evidence found on Sarah's clothing didn't match samples taken from Robert or Amanda. The murder weapon, likely a hunting knife or similar serrated blade, was nowhere to be found despite an extensive search of the Wilson property and surrounding areas. A breakthrough came when Carter interviewed Elena Gonzalez, the Wilsons' next-door neighbor. Elena, visibly nervous during the interview, mentioned that she had seen Sarah arguing with Amanda in the driveway the day before her disappearance. More intriguingly, Elena let slip that Amanda had always seemed jealous of her daughter's youth and beauty. This information, combined with the tumultuous home environment and Amanda's shaky alibi for the night of the murder, led Carter to focus his attention on Sarah's mother. He theorized that years of resentment had finally boiled over, resulting in a confrontation that turned deadly. As the investigation entered its second week, Carter felt confident they were on the right track. He obtained a warrant to search Amanda's personal belongings and communications, hoping to find the crucial piece of evidence that would break the case wide open. However, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of Carter's mind. Something about Robert Wilson's calm demeanor and perfect alibi struck him as too neat, too convenient. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman. These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak. She claimed to have been home alone watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence, her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, confessed that Robert had become increasingly paranoid that Sarah might uncover their affair. He had feared that her knowledge could ruin him both personally and professionally. As Carter pieced together the new evidence, the true motive for Sarah's murder began to crystallize. Robert, desperate to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life, had taken drastic measures. Convinced that Sarah had discovered his infidelity, he had lured her into the woods under the pretense of discussing a family matter and murdered her in a fit of rage. The missing camera was the final piece of the puzzle. It was found hidden in Robert's office, containing photos that Sarah had taken of Robert and Elena together. Realizing his mistake, Carter quickly moved to correct it. Amanda Wilson was released, and the focus of the investigation shifted to Robert. On a cold November morning, Robert Wilson was arrested at his office. As he was led away in handcuffs, the community of Millbrook breathed a collective sigh of relief. The true killer was finally brought to justice, and Sarah Thompson's memory was honored with the truth she had sought to uncover. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman. These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak. She claimed to have been home alone watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence, her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, admitted that she had lied in her previous statement to protect Robert. The affair cast Robert's alibi for the night of the murder in a new light. Elena confirmed that they had indeed met that evening, contradicting Robert's claim of working late. This revelation shattered the carefully constructed timeline Robert had provided. As Carter delved further into the relationship between Robert and Elena, he uncovered a web of lies and secret rendezvous. Bank records showed Robert had recently inquired about transferring large sums of money offshore. Email exchanges hinted at plans for a new life together, away from their spouses and responsibilities. The detective now faced a troubling question. Could Robert Wilson, the grieving stepfather, actually be Sarah's killer? The motive was unclear, but the cracks in Robert's perfect facade were beginning to show. Carter realized he had been so focused on Amanda that he had nearly missed the real story unfolding right before his eyes. The pivotal moment in the investigation came from an unexpected source: Sarah's best friend, Emily Chun. She approached Detective Carter with a small leather-bound book, Sarah's personal diary. Emily, racked with guilt, admitted she had initially withheld the diary, fearing it might tarnish Sarah's memory. But as suspicion fell on Amanda, Emily realized the truth was more important than protecting her friend's secrets. Carter spent a sleepless night poring over Sarah's private thoughts. The diary painted a vivid picture of a young woman grappling with a terrible discovery. In entries dating back several months, Sarah wrote of her growing suspicion that her stepfather was having an affair. She described catching glimpses of furtive text messages, overhearing hushed phone calls, and noticing Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. The most damning entry came just 3 days before Sarah's murder. In shaky handwriting, she recounted following Robert one evening and witnessing him in an intimate embrace with Elena Gonzalez. Sarah wrote of her disgust and betrayal, expressing uncertainty about whether to confront Robert or tell her mother. This revelation provided the missing piece of the puzzle. Sarah had discovered Robert's affair, presenting a clear motive for murder. Robert, a man who had built his life on carefully maintaining appearances, faced the threat of losing everything: his marriage, his reputation, and his financial stability. Armed with this new information, Carter revisited the forensic evidence. He ordered a more thorough examination of Sarah's clothing, specifically searching for trace evidence that might have been overlooked. The results were telling. Fibers found on Sarah's jacket matched those from a rare wool blend used in Robert's expensive suits. Furthermore, a re-examination of Sarah's phone records showed a series of calls to Robert's office number on the day of her disappearance. The calls had been brief, suggesting Sarah might have been trying to confront her stepfather or arrange a meeting. Carter also discovered that Robert had purchased a hunting knife from a local sporting goods store just a week before the murder. The knife, conspicuously missing from the Wilson home, matched the type of weapon believed to have been used in the crime. As the pieces fell into place, Carter realized the extent of Robert's deception. He had not only manipulated his family and community, but had also skillfully misdirected the entire investigation towards Amanda. The detective felt a mix of admiration for Robert's cunning and disgust at his cold-blooded actions. With mounting evidence pointing to Robert Wilson as the killer, Carter knew he needed to move quickly. The man who had once been viewed as a pillar of the community was now revealed to be a calculating murderer, willing to sacrifice his stepdaughter to protect his secrets. Detective Carter decided to confront Robert Wilson at his office, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the media that had been camped outside the Wilson home. As Carter and his partner entered the plush confines of Robert's financial advisory firm, they found him in the middle of a client meeting, the picture of professional composure. In a voice barely above a whisper, Robert began to talk. He spoke of Sarah confronting him in the woods, threatening to expose his affair to Amanda and Elena's husband. He described the panic that overtook him, the fear of losing everything he had worked for. With tears streaming down his face, Robert recounted how he had lashed out in desperation, silencing Sarah permanently. The confession poured out of him, a torrent of guilt and self-loathing. Robert described how he had meticulously planned to frame Amanda, playing on the known tensions between stepmother and stepdaughter. As Carter placed him under arrest, Robert's only words were a broken plea: "Don't tell Elena. Please, don't let her know what I've done." The once proud man was led out of his office in handcuffs, his world collapsing around him as the truth of his actions finally came to light. After a 2-week trial and mere hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, including first-degree murder. The judge, citing the brutal nature of the crime and Robert's calculated attempts to deceive investigators, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but for those whose lives had been shattered by Robert's actions, the wounds would take far longer to heal. In the end, the case of Robert Wilson stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of a young woman's voice, even when silenced, to ultimately reveal the truth. A psychological exhumation changed the outcome of the investigation 4 years later. A psychological profile is called a detailed examination and analysis of a person's personality, their character traits, behavioral peculiarities, emotional state, intellect, self-esteem, and the motivations behind their actions. To compile such a profile, experts typically resort to methods such as interviews, various psychological tests, observations, situational modeling, and even analysis of social media pages. But what if the person has long passed away, and you need to create their psychological profile and assess their emotional state shortly before death? The case of Kristen Trickle is quite complex and unique in its kind. It is referred to as the first instance of psychological exhumation in forensic history, conducted to uncover the motivations and thought processes of a young woman who suddenly decided to end her life. No one believed that the joyful, devout Kristen, who had big plans for the future, would suddenly end everything without any apparent reason. The forensic pathologist's conclusions supported the main theory, but an experienced psychologist managed to uncover the truth. The main problem was the time that had passed since the tragedy. Years had gone by, but eventually, this did not prevent the conviction of the criminal who was sure he had gotten away with it. Kristen Trickle, née Trickle, was born on August 14, 1993, in a small town in southeastern Nebraska. Her childhood can hardly be described as carefree and untroubled. Her biological mother left the family when the little girl was not even 3 years old. The woman abandoned her husband and child for another man, moved to California, and never again showed interest in her daughter's fate. Kristen's father, James, raised his daughter on his own, doing everything possible to ensure she lacked for nothing. However, the man suffered from a severe illness that progressively worsened, and when Kristen turned 16, her father passed away. Since there were no other close relatives, she could have been sent to a shelter until she came of age. At this time, an aunt and uncle on her father's side, who lived in the neighboring state of Kansas, stepped in. Although the couple was raising 3 children of their own, they expressed a willingness to take in their orphan niece and do everything possible to ensure her a comfortable and happy life. Soon, the young girl moved into her relative's home. In her new family, Kristen never felt like an outsider. On the contrary, her aunt and uncle treated her just as they did their own children, surrounding her with love and care. Kristen herself did well in school, attended art studio classes, helped her family with household tasks, and dreamed of becoming a veterinary doctor because she loved animals dearly. Relatives and friends described her as responsive, kind, friendly, and very sweet. She never despaired, confidently pursued her goals, and energized everyone around her with her optimism. The Rice family was religious, so they regularly attended church on Sundays, where 18-year-old Kristen met a young man named Colby. He was an aspiring musician performing as part of a band that played music during sermons and services. He had also recently turned 18, was quite talented, and dreamed of building a successful music career in the future. The young people quickly formed a friendship, which soon turned into a romantic relationship. Colby was skilled on the guitar and wrote his own songs, which he dedicated to his beloved, capturing her heart. He was open, sociable, cheerful, easily made friends, and could easily be the life of any party. After finishing high school, the young man took a serious interest in military affairs and joined the Army. By the age of 18, he had signed several contracts and commenced his service in the U.S. Armed Forces. Over the next 3 years, he managed to build a decent military career. Meanwhile, he stayed in touch with Kristen, with whom he frequently called and corresponded. At the age of 21, Colby unexpectedly entered the reserves, returned home, and proposed to his sweetheart, who happily accepted. The couple married in April 2014. The newlyweds settled in a small town called Hazen, Kansas, where Colby finished college and pursued a music career, albeit not very successfully. He performed at small parties and local events, playing cover versions of well-known hits. The couple had 2 dogs, which they adored, and many considered their marriage quite happy. However, 5 years into their marriage, a terrible tragedy occurred. On a grim Halloween Eve on October 31st, 2019, around 4 in the morning, a distressed call was made to the emergency services dispatch. The caller, a man who identified himself as Colby Trickle, reported his wife Kristen had fired a bullet into her head from a revolver kept in their home. A medical team was promptly dispatched to the scene along with a police patrol car that was nearby at the time. At the front door, they were met by a young man who allowed the officers inside but stayed outside himself. Trickle appeared relatively calm given the severity of the situation. When the officers entered the bedroom, they found a woman lying on the bed in a pool of her own blood. A large revolver lay on her abdomen, and a gunshot wound was evident on her chin. It seemed she had already passed away, but unexpectedly the victim moved her hand, and an officer found a weak pulse and breathing. Following this, Kristen was moved to the adjacent room to properly position her on the floor for resuscitation efforts. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, she had passed away by the time the ambulance arrived, and the medical team could only confirm her death. Sergeant Brandon Hotman went outside and informed Colby that his spouse had passed away. The young man asked repeatedly if the officer was sure about this, and upon receiving confirmation, he began to cry. His behavior and tears seemed insincere, as just minutes before Hotman's arrival, he had been casually talking with other patrollers about video games. At first glance, it appeared that the woman had indeed decided to end her life voluntarily, but upon examining the scene, experienced detectives immediately suspected foul play. It was Halloween Eve, and it seemed the deceased had been actively preparing for the celebration. On her bedroom's vanity lay handmade costume decorations she had prepared, and in the kitchen, themed treats for children were set out in bowls, including lollipop bats, ghost gummy worms, and more. The chosen method of ending her life was very strange and untypical for a woman, as was the scene itself. First, the deceased was found nearly undressed, wearing only her underwear. Women generally want to look beautiful even in death, concerned about how they will be found. Secondly, a gunshot to the head is not a typically feminine method due to concerns about disfiguring themselves. Kristen's face was so badly damaged that she had to be buried in a closed casket. The third and most significant oddity was the weapon itself. The revolver was too large and cumbersome for such a petite and fragile woman. It would have been uncomfortable for her to hold, and she could hardly have twisted her arm to shoot herself in the chin. Moreover, the position of the weapon puzzled the officer, as it lay on the woman's stomach pointing sideways. However, the deceased spouse explained that after realizing what had happened, he too had thought about ending his life, held the revolver to his temple, but then abandoned the thought and decided to call emergency services in hopes of saving his beloved. While law enforcement continued their work at the scene, the woman's mobile phone, lying on a nightstand, unexpectedly rang with an alarm. It turned out the deceased had plans for the morning and had set the alarm not to be late, but she seemingly changed her mind during the night and decided to end her life. This looked highly suspicious, and detectives suspected foul play. They were dealing with a masterful staging. The widower, now the main suspect, was due for questioning. Colby willingly agreed to go to the police station to give his statement. He appeared upset but not devastated, behaving calmly and confidently. He explained that on that evening, his wife Kristen returned from her job at Walmart, where she was a manager expecting a promotion to senior manager. They had played video games together, and then Colby went to bed early because he was feeling unwell while Kristen went to the kitchen to finish cleaning and setting out sweets for the holiday. In the middle of the night, Colby was awakened by a sudden loud bang. For a few seconds, he was disoriented, his ears ringing, and he could see nothing in the darkness. Once he turned on the light, he found his wife lying motionless beside him, blood pouring from her head. He tried to revive her, but realizing it was futile, he grabbed the revolver, held it to his own head, but then set it back on her body called emergency services, and went outside to meet the police. The sequence and nature of his actions raised many questions. For instance, why he placed the weapon on the woman's abdomen instead of throwing it on the floor, the bed, or leaving it on a nightstand. It was also unclear why he waited outside for the police and medics if he thought his wife might still be saved. Typically, in such situations, people attempt to perform life-saving measures or simply press something against the wound to stop the bleeding. The former serviceman did not approach his wife again, explaining that he was in shock while a police officer was trying to provide first aid before the medics arrived. Colby did not come over or inquire about the situation. Instead, he casually talked outside with a patrol officer about music and video games. Upon learning that Kristen was no longer alive, he squeezed out a few tears but quickly regained his composure. At the station, Colby was asked the standard question about whether there was any life insurance on the deceased, to which he responded negatively but added that he was entitled to some minor payouts from the armed forces where he had served. Incidentally, Trickle began boasting about his accomplishments, noting that he had served in intelligence and was involved in special operations around the world. His words sounded convincing, though it soon turned out that almost none of what he said was true. When asked why, in his opinion, his wife might have taken such a desperate step, he replied that she had suffered from prolonged depression from an early age, which developed against the backdrop of all the events that happened to her in childhood and adolescence. He mentioned her mother's betrayal, her father's death, and her forced life in her uncle and aunt's home, whom Kristen did not even know before. The widower's words again sounded convincing, and he spoke confidently and calmly. Nonetheless, experienced investigators felt that this man was lying and possibly had premeditated what to say. However, at that moment, they had nothing to charge him with, as there were no concrete pieces of evidence against him, so Mr. Trickle had to be released. Kristen's family's perspective: when Kristen's uncle, aunt, and her siblings were informed of the tragedy, they immediately traveled to Hayes, nearly 500 miles from their city, to speak with the police and prepare for the funeral. Unanimously, they vehemently denied the possibility that she could have willingly ended her life, citing her deep religious faith, regular church attendance, and her belief that such an act was a sin. Additionally, according to her family, Kristen was a life-loving optimist with ambitious future plans. Specifically, she wanted to open a shelter for homeless animals and had even scoped out an available property with a large plot of land she intended to lease long-term for this purpose. These statements were soon verified, and detectives confirmed that she had been negotiating to rent the property. Moreover, she was anticipating a promotion at work, a position she was very proud of, was preparing her costume and candies for Halloween, and had promised to visit her sister for her birthday in mid-November. Her relatives also insisted that she had never suffered from depression, had no mental disorders or harmful habits. Another crucial point they stressed was that she would never recklessly abandon her beloved dogs. During discussions with the police, the uncle and aunt suggested that Colby might have coldly dealt with his wife, orchestrating it to appear as though she had voluntarily left this world. They described her husband as a cruel and domineering man who tried to control every aspect of her interactions, chose whom she could communicate with, and would fly into a rage if Kristen did not respond to his calls or messages immediately. He also forbade her from talking to her relatives, and she would call them secretly from her husband. Visits were rare, but during her last visit, she confided that she could no longer tolerate such treatment, had talked with her husband about it, and if things did not change, they would have to separate. Following conversations with both the widower and the deceased relatives, detectives believed that the forensic examination would be decisive in the case. The examination revealed only one entry wound from a bullet located on the chin. The shot had been fired while the woman was lying on her back with the gun barrel pressed closely to her head. It was possible that she could have inflicted the wound herself, although it would have been extremely awkward for her to do so. There were no signs of struggle or resistance on Kristen's body. However, upon learning from relatives that Colby was a true tyrant with controlling behavior, the detectives insisted on an additional examination for any signs of bruises, abrasions, scratches, or other injuries in various stages of healing. They hypothesized that if the former serviceman had occasionally been violent towards his wife, there would inevitably be some traces. Yet, the investigation was met with disappointment, as no internal or external injuries were found other than the gunshot wound. The investigation continued to scrutinize Colby, examining his personality, and it was revealed that he was a pathological liar. He lied so frequently and convincingly that it seemed he began to believe his own fabrications. It started with the fact that he had never been in any hot spots nor had any involvement with intelligence, despite having convinced everyone during the interrogation that he was telling the truth. The man lied to those around him about having a successful music career and high earnings. In reality, for the past several years, Kristen, who worked tirelessly, had been the main breadwinner for their family. Colby, on the other hand, scraped by with occasional gigs during holidays, spending the rest of his time playing video games. Despite his real talent, he lacked persistence, patience, and was hindered by his laziness. Furthermore, the police had a warrant to seize and examine gadgets owned by the couple, and this inspection yielded quite intriguing results. The deceased phone calendar was packed with scheduled activities ranging from haircuts to meetings with a real estate agent. Meanwhile, Colby's messages revealed that he had been openly flirting with another woman, even exchanging messages while at the police station. On a laptop in the living room, a search history that had been deleted was recovered, showing that shortly before the tragedy, there were queries about the payout amount for a life insurance policy in the event of death. This last aspect particularly interested the authorities. Checks revealed that Colby had lied again. 2 insurance policies had been taken out on his wife, with him as the beneficiary in the event of her death. These included military spouse insurance as well as a standard life insurance policy. The amounts involved were far from trivial, contrary to what the man had claimed. He had even calculated exactly what payouts he would be entitled to. Despite numerous inconsistencies in the case, direct allegations from the deceased relatives against Colby, and the existence of a clear motive for him, the decision ultimately hinged on the forensic expert's report. The document stated that there were no signs of violence on the body except for a single gunshot wound, suggesting that it was highly likely that the deceased had voluntarily ended her life. The case was closed and archived. By that time, the widower had already received the payouts due to him from a special insurance for U.S. Armed Forces spouses. He received nearly $50,000 and from the life insurance policy over $100,000. On the very day the money was deposited into his account, he ordered a life-sized realistic doll for intimate pleasures from an online store. He also purchased a new gaming console, an electric guitar, and expensive musical equipment and began spending the rest on clothes and entertainment, nearly every evening in bars and restaurants. Colby was enjoying life, sparing no expense for himself, and genuinely believed that the story was over. With no evidence against him, and thus no potential charges, he lived happily for about 2 years until a pivotal event occurred. In the summer of 2021, a new district prosecutor was appointed, to whom the detectives handling the Trickle case appealed for help. They requested permission to reopen the investigation, asserting they had little doubt that the widower had eliminated his wife, making it appear as though she had voluntarily departed from life. As proof, they presented all the peculiarities and discrepancies, pointed to the restored browser history, and highlighted the suspect's very unusual behavior and his clear motive. After reviewing the case materials, the prosecutor authorized the reopening of the case, and in July 2021, Trickle was finally taken into custody. He was charged with first-degree premeditated homicide and intentional misleading of the investigation. During his arrest, he remained calm and immediately contacted his lawyers, who began working on his defense right away. Colby's defense relied on the forensic pathologist's findings and argued that Kristen had suffered from chronic depression for many years and that her tragic departure was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, his lawyers tried to portray their client as a loving and caring husband, a valorous serviceman, and a devout person. The investigation could have hit a dead end, as it relied heavily on the same medical conclusion. Thus, the prosecution took an unprecedented step by bringing an experienced specialist to create a psychological profile of the deceased and analyze her emotional state just before the tragedy. This unusual method was termed a psychological autopsy or psychological exhumation. The psychiatrist conducted extensive work analyzing data from Kristen's mobile phone, her social media posts, her most recent photos, and also by interviewing her relatives, friends, and colleagues. Gathering and analyzing the information took months, But the expert's conclusion was clear. Kristen could not have intended to end her life given her short-term and long-term plans. The legal proceedings in this complex case began only in September 2023, nearly 4 years after the tragedy. The defendant had a clear motive, behaved suspiciously, and consistently lied during interrogations, but the forensic expert's conclusion initially worked in his favor. However, the prosecution now had another report that could potentially turn the case around. When Colby was questioned about the insurance inquiries on his computer, he claimed they were probably made by his wife, wanting to know the payout amount. However, the date and time of the request completely contradicted his words, as the girl was confirmed to be at work at that time, verified by surveillance footage from the store. Asked about the life-size doll for intimate pleasures that he purchased even before his late wife was buried in other expenses, he responded that he couldn't sleep alone and needed someone to hold, and that he bought the console, guitar, etc. as a way to distract himself from grief. His mother corroborated his statements, fiercely defending her son throughout the trial. The psychiatrist's conclusion about the victim's emotional state was pivotal. This meticulous work took time, but its results left no doubt that Kristen had not planned to end her life. Additionally, a curious detail emerged from the autopsy report regarding the bullet's trajectory angle. In the courtroom, the jury was shown the weapon used and the angle at which the bullet entered the girl's chin. Kristen was right-handed, but the nature of the wound suggested that either she shot with her left hand or someone positioned to her left had placed the gun to the head of the sleeping girl and fired. To life imprisonment with the possibility of parole no earlier than 50 years. The defendant never admitted his guilt, and all his appeals were rejected. Most curious and strange in this case, however, is that corrections regarding the cause of death were never made to the medical report. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you. On November 20th, 2023, the jury unanimously found Colby guilty on all counts, sentencing him